They called me the family failure for 15 years, until the day they stepped onto my private jet and realized I was a billionaire. The invitation to the annual Carter family barbecue sat unopened on my marble kitchen island, its red embossed lettering catching the early Arizona light through the glass walls of my Scottsdale penthouse. For 15 years, I'd kept my success quiet, purposefully invisible. But that was about to change, and not because I wanted it to. My phone lit up with the headline that detonated the silence. Forbes 30 Under 40, Nora Carter's virtual design empire valued at $4.1 billion. The article was dropping in 2 days, conveniently, just before the reunion. I hadn't wanted this spotlight. But you can't outrun the truth forever, not when it's wrapped in billions and broadcast on national media. Nora, my assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, your brother Caleb is on the line again. Of course he was. He'd been calling nonstop ever since the news leaked to CNBC. I sighed and picked up. Hey, Caleb. What the hell, Nora? He barked. CNBC just called me asking how it feels to be the brother of a billionaire. You wanna explain something to me? I strolled toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, sipping espresso, my gaze sweeping across the desert skyline. Guess you'll find out at the reunion like everyone else. Cut the crap, he snapped. You let us believe you were broke for years. Mom thought you were sleeping on someone's couch. Worried, were they? I said with a laugh. Is that why I got all those helpful lectures about throwing away my future? The condescending advice to go work for Uncle Marvin's law firm? They were trying to help. No, I said, voice sharpening. They were trying to mold me. And you let them. Caleb had always been the golden boy. Ivy League graduate, MBA at 24, working at our father's investment firm since college. He never questioned the family path. I, on the other hand, questioned everything, and paid the price for it. How long? He finally asked. I walked onto the balcony, watching one of my 3 Teslas glide silently into the driveway below. Remember when I moved into that crappy studio near Tempe? Yeah. That was, 15 years ago. You started doing that 3D digital art thing? That's the one. I smiled. That's when it all began. Back then, I was the crazy one who abandoned a finance degree to play with pixels, as Dad used to sneer. What they didn't know was that I had already sold my first virtual reality sculpture collection for $660,000 before the lease on that studio was even signed. Wait, you made that much back then? Caleb's voice cracked. And 6 months later, another batch for $200,000. By the time Dad stood at Christmas dinner saying I was just figuring things out, I'd passed the $1 million mark. But you still drove that busted Honda. You asked Mom and Dad for rent money. I laughed. No, Caleb. I asked them to invest in my startup. They refused, loudly. And the Civic? That was strategy. Just like everything else. There was silence. Then, in a low, stunned voice, how rich are you? Forbes will print $7.2 billion. That's conservative. The real number is closer to 10. I imagined him blinking, mouth open, doing mental math he couldn't compute. I've gotta jump into a board meeting, I said, already turning away. See you at the reunion. Click. I pressed the intercom. Samantha, is everything in place? Yes, Miss Carter. The jet is fueled, the Rolls-Royce fleet is en route to collect your family, the resort has been secured, and all NDAs are signed. Perfect. I picked up the glossy invitation again. For 15 years, they had labeled me the dreamer, the dropout, the disappointment. Not anymore. My phone buzzed. A message from my sister. Harper, OMG Nora. The Forbes article. Please tell me this is a prank? I left her on read. Funny how the quiet ones always surprise them. Harper had built a modest career in corporate strategy. She used to brag about her 6-figure salary while dramatically covering dinner tabs I didn't need help with, sighing over how hard it must be for me. The intercom buzzed again. Miss Carter, your parents are on the line. Tell them I'm in a meeting. I glanced at my Cartier watch, then tossed on my sunglasses. Also, call the helipad. I'll take the chopper to today's board meeting. As I grabbed my tablet and pitch notes, my thoughts drifted to the dinner that started it all. I was 22, fresh out of Wharton, sitting at Sunday dinner in my parents' Phoenix estate. Dad sat across from me, glass of Cabernet in one hand, disdain in the other. 3D design isn't real art, he said, eyebrows raised. And that crypto nonsense you're obsessed with? He scoffed. No one's going to pay for computer-generated junk. I started. Enough, he snapped. You either join the firm like we planned, or you're on your own. No support. No handouts. My mother smiled politely, placing her hand over mine. Sweetheart, we're just concerned. You need structure. Something respectable. I glanced around the table, Dad's scowl, Mom's pity, Caleb's silence, Harper's smug smirk. That was the moment I made my decision. I didn't tell them about the $50,000 I'd just made. I didn't tell them about the 3 VR galleries courting me. Or the venture capital firms blowing up my inbox. You're right, I said, rising. I'll figure it out on my own. 2 weeks later, I moved into that shoebox studio in Tempe. They assumed I was broke, too proud to ask for help. But I wasn't broke. I was building an empire. Year 1 was brutal, 18-hour days, cold calls, sleepless nights filled with code, design, and audacity. Then my first major collection, Neon Syntax, dropped. It sold out in 6 hours. Total earnings, $1.2 million. I reinvested every cent. Hired engineers. Built platforms. I wasn't just making art, I was redefining how digital ownership worked. But every time I visited home? Same Civic. Same faded jeans. Same quiet smile. Let me help with rent, Mom would offer. No thanks, I'd say. I'm doing fine. And I was, more than fine. By the end of year 1, my net worth crossed $10 million. By year 3? Over $100 million. But to them, I was still Nora, the idealistic one. 15 years later, standing on the rooftop helipad of my Scottsdale building, I climbed into my private helicopter, wondering how the little white lie I let them believe had grown into a $10 billion secret. My phone buzzed, another message from Dad. We need to talk. I smirked and turned off the phone. He could wait. After 15 years of backhanded concern and subtle mockery, they were finally about to see the truth. And I was going to make sure they never forgot it. The Forbes article dropped at precisely 6 a.m. I was already awake, black coffee in hand, sitting in my sleek home office, lit only by the glow of my wall of monitors. Headlines blazed across the screen. Digital art disruptor, how Nora Carter quietly built a $10 billion empire. Right below the title was a full-page photo, one I had carefully approved, me standing in front of my most successful VR gallery exhibit, wearing a custom couture suit that cost more than Harper's annual salary. The piece wasn't just a puff profile. It detailed every platform I'd built, every investor I'd won over, every tech partnership, and every record-breaking auction. The world now saw me for who I really was. My phone erupted. Harper, wait. $10 billion? Caleb, I knew something was off yesterday. Mom, Nora, sweetheart, please call me. Dad, this must be a mistake. A misprint, surely. And then, surprisingly. Aunt June, is our Nora really the Nora Carter? I muted the group chat. I had no patience for damage control. My inbox was already overflowing, interview requests, TED Talk invitations, investor pitches, offers for documentaries. But one email stood out, Martin Delgado, my father's longtime business partner. Nora, I believe there may be strategic value in exploring synergies between Carter Interactive and Delgado Capital. I understand your father may have had past reservations, but I assure you, we are open to evolving. I burst out laughing. 3 years ago, I had pitched Martin a partnership. He'd looked me dead in the eye and said, we don't gamble on internet gimmicks. Now? Suddenly interested in synergies. The intercom buzzed again. Miss Carter, Samantha said, your mother is in the lobby. She's quite insistent. I pulled up the security feed. There she was, Elaine Carter, immaculate as always in a tailored Chanel jacket, arguing with my doorman like her life depended on it. Let her up, I said, setting my coffee down. Time to face the first triple. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and my mother stepped into my penthouse. Her heels clicked across the polished floors, her expression somewhere between awe and disbelief. Her eyes scanned the floor-to-ceiling windows, the marble counters, the Keith Haring original hanging behind me, worth more than their entire house. "Nora," she whispered. "What is all this?" "This is my real home," I said calmly, handing her a cup of coffee. "Not the little condo I keep for family visits." She walked slowly toward the glass, fingertips grazing the furniture like she was afraid it might vanish. "But how? When? You've been living like this. For how long?" 15 years, I said. "Since the night you and Dad said digital art was a phase. Remember? You told me no one in their right mind would pay for computer-generated nonsense." She turned to face me, her carefully composed expression beginning to crack. "But we saw you struggling. That tiny apartment. The old Civic. The rent." I gave a dry smile. "I never asked for rent help, Mom. I asked you both to invest. There's a difference. You lied to us." "No," I replied. "I just never corrected the version of the story you all wanted to believe. You were so convinced I was failing, you never bothered to look deeper." She sat down in one of my leather chairs, her posture suddenly fragile. "Does anyone else know?" "Just Caleb. He found out yesterday when CNBC called him." She nodded slowly, then whispered, "Your father thinks it's all a mistake. Some other Nora Carter." I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder. "Here. This is the proposal I gave Dad 3 years ago. If he had invested the $1 million I asked for, his equity would be worth over $100 million today." Her hands trembled as she opened it. "He said you were asking for a handout," she murmured. "And you believed him." She didn't answer. Just stared. I walked back to the window, gazing at the city I now quietly ruled. "The family reunion is still on, by the way. I just changed the location." She looked up. "You did?" "I bought out the entire resort. Too public otherwise. We'll be celebrating on my private island." Her mouth fell slightly open. "Your island? In the Caribbean? I bought it last year after closing my first billion-dollar deal." She stood up slowly, smoothing her skirt with trembling fingers. "When your father sees this, he'll have to accept it," I said quietly. His daughter, the one he called impractical, built something bigger than anything in the Carter legacy. I walked her to the elevator. Just before the doors closed, I added, "Remember that Bentley you always wanted? The one Dad said was too impractical?" She blinked, caught off guard. "Yes. I bought 3 of them last month. Just because I could." The doors slid shut on her stunned expression. As soon as she left, I pressed the intercom again. "Samantha, is everything in place for the reunion?" "Yes, Ms. Carter. All guests will receive personalized portfolios documenting the investment opportunities they turned down over the years, along with current valuations. The video timeline of your milestones is finalized and queued for the welcome dinner." "Excellent." I pulled out my phone and typed a single message into the family group chat. "Looking forward to seeing everyone at the reunion. Dress appropriately for a private island. Transportation will be provided." Then I refreshed the stock dashboard. My company's value had jumped another billion since the article hit. Before sunrise, I'd become one of the wealthiest women in the country. And no one in my family had ever seen it coming. The morning of the Carter family reunion was bright and clear. I stood on the private runway of my Scottsdale airfield as 3 black Rolls-Royces pulled in, one after another. First came my father, still upright, still sharp-eyed, but with a flicker of unease in his gaze. My mother followed, subdued and quiet. Caleb, Harper, and a caravan of uncles, aunts, and cousins trickled out after them, their faces filled with barely veiled confusion. And there, gleaming in the Arizona sun, sat my jet. A white Gulfstream G700, its side boldly emblazoned in silver. "Carter Interactive." "Welcome," I said, letting my voice carry. "Hope the ride was comfortable." "Nora," my father said, trying to reassert control, "this is excessive. The resort would have been fine." I smiled. The resort was too public, Dad. This needed to be meaningful. My God, Harper muttered, clutching her the ore bag. You really have your own island. They boarded the jet in silence, eyes wide as they took in the gold-trimmed interior, original artwork, and baccarat crystal flutes. Is that a real Picasso? Aunt Diane whispered. Yes, I replied. Picked it up last year. My father tried again. Nora, we need to talk. We will, I said, lifting my glass of champagne. When we land. Until then, enjoy the flight. This bottle costs more than your firm made last quarter. He flinched. 2 hours later, we began our descent toward a sparkling blue jewel in the Caribbean, a 300-acre private island with a luxury resort at its center. And just as planned, they saw it. Visible from the sky, in massive white letters across the helipad. Nora Carter. What does that say? Harper squinted. So. Hi? Her jaw dropped as the full name came into view. Of course I branded the helipad. Digital billboards surrounded the landing strip, cycling through my best-selling immersive art pieces. Each sale price was proudly displayed, $2.3 million. $11.5 million. $670 million. Each one a message. As we touched down, I stepped onto the tarmac and smiled. Welcome, I said. To Carter Island. The luxury resort stood like a futuristic palace, carved into the untouched beauty of the Caribbean coastline. As my family disembarked, their eyes darted around, trying to take in the grandeur. But they were already behind. This wasn't a place designed to impress them. It was a living monument to everything they thought I couldn't achieve. Everyone's suites are ready, I said, leading the way. You'll find some light reading material waiting for you, might want to go over it before dinner. They didn't know it yet, but those folders had been custom curated. For Dad, a printed list of every investment opportunity I'd offered him over the past decade, annotated with current valuations, all totaling over $800 million. For Harper, a comparison chart showing her annual salary next to the daily interest my portfolio generated. For Caleb, an internal audit of how much his firm lost by passing on a partnership with my company in 2019, spoiler, it was a lot. They disappeared to their rooms in stunned silence. An hour later, I summoned them to the main dining hall. It was a glass-walled structure perched above the cliffs, with panoramic views of the turquoise sea. The table stretched across the room like a royal banquet, polished mahogany, crystal glassware, and silver place settings. On every wall, I had framed and backlit the Forbes article. It glowed behind them, inescapable. They entered slowly, all pretenses gone. Even their designer outfits seemed cheap here. Please, I said, gesturing to the seats. Let's begin. My father cleared his throat, trying to reclaim some measure of control. Nora, I think I speak for all of us when I say, we're surprised. I raised an eyebrow. Just surprised? Not angry? Not disappointed that I didn't tell you? Just surprised? He hesitated. We didn't know. No, I said softly. You didn't want to know. Mom spoke up. We thought you were struggling. The Civic. The tiny apartment. You thought I was broke, I finished for her, my voice calm. And you were comfortable with that. Comfortable being the ones who had it figured out. The ones who offered me pity instead of respect. Harper looked down, cheeks flushed. I picked up the bill because I thought. Because you enjoyed playing the successful sister, I interrupted, while the artsy one stumbled through life. No one responded. I want to show you something, I said. I pressed a button on the side of the table. With a low mechanical hum, motorized panels opened in the ceiling. High-resolution screens descended all around us, casting soft light over the stunned faces below. What followed was a timeline, my timeline. On one side, the dismissive comments my family made over the years. On the other, the results. 2010. Dad, this 3D art thing is a waste of your Wharton degree. Result, first digital sculpture collection sells for $50,000. 2012. Mom, you need a stable career. Result, my company valuation hits $15 million. 2015. Harper, at least one of us is doing well. Result, I close a $120 million deal with a major tech firm. 2018. Caleb, crypto art is just a scam. Result, platform hits 500,000 users and $600 million in sales. 2022. Dad's firm, we don't fund online gimmicks. Result, Carter Interactive crosses $3 billion valuation. Silence filled the room as the final screen hovered in the air, a glowing monument to their blindness. I looked around. Every time you dismissed me, every time you laughed or changed the subject, I remembered. And I used it. My father swallowed hard. Why didn't you tell us? Because you never wanted to hear it, I said. You had already made up your minds. I needed to show you that success doesn't always wear a suit. It doesn't follow a family playbook. Sometimes, the person you think is chasing a fantasy is building a new reality. I stepped to the edge of the room, looking out at the sea. The hardest part wasn't the work. It was sitting through 15 years of family dinners, listening to your wins, your investments, your promotions, while I stayed quiet. My cousin Marcus, ever the realist, spoke up through gritted teeth. You were playing the long game. We played it safe. You shot for the stars. I turned. And you mocked me for it. I looked at Harper. You flaunted your six-figure salary like it was gold. I made that during a coffee break. Enough, Dad said, standing. We were wrong, okay? We made assumptions. But we meant well. I didn't raise my voice. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here for understanding. I pressed another button. The screens changed again, this time showing the prototype of my next project, a new platform for immersive digital ownership, expected to disrupt the entire art tech industry. Estimated launch valuation, $10 billion. This goes live next month, I said. And this time, you'll see it in real time. No more doubting. Silence once again. But it wasn't the awkward kind, it was the kind that comes after illusions shatter. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice trembling. We're proud of you, Nora. We always should have been. Thank you, I said gently. But I didn't do this for your pride. I did it for me. Because it was my vision. My dream. I looked around, letting the truth settle into every corner of the room. And now, I said, raising a glass of wine, this is my empire. Caleb spoke softly. So, what happens now? Now, I said, we have dinner. Like a family. But this time, it's on my terms. One by one, they lifted their glasses. The shock hadn't worn off, but something deeper was taking root, respect. We ate beneath chandeliers imported from Florence, drank wine older than Harper's career, and, miraculously, talked. Not just about me. About possibilities. About the future. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't just the black sheep. I was the blueprint. When the evening ended and they retreated to their private suites, I stayed behind, watching the moonlight ripple across the water. Samantha peered beside me. Was it worth it? She asked. I thought of the screens, the disbelief, the stunned silence, and, finally, the genuine awe. Yes, I said. But not for the reasons I used to think. She tilted her head. Then why? I smiled. Because I'm finally free. Not just successful. Free to be fully myself. I watched the waves in silence. The world they came from, of mutual funds, country clubs, and polished veneers, was fading. The world I'd built, interactive, immersive, electric, was only beginning. Later that night, a note was slipped under my door. I recognized the handwriting instantly, my father's. Sturdy cursive. Always neat. Always controlled. Nora. I was wrong. Not just about your business, about everything. You didn't just succeed. You changed the game. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Dad. I read it once. Then again. Then placed it in a frame beside something else I'd kept for years, the receipt from my first digital sale, $50,000. The beginning. The next morning, the family gathered for breakfast on the resort's sea deck. The sunlight painted the sea gold, and the mood had shifted, curiosity replacing discomfort, respect softening past judgment. It was Caleb who spoke first. So, this is really your island? All of it? All 300 acres, I replied, pouring myself coffee. The resort, the landing strip, the forest trails. Even the reef around the cove is protected under Carter Foundation funding. Harper sipped her mimosa, then smiled, genuine this time. I still can't believe you kept this secret for so long. I leaned back. It wasn't just about staying quiet. It was about building something without interference. Without the constant questions. Without needing to prove anything. You proved it now, said Mom softly. No, I corrected her gently. I didn't build all this to prove you wrong. I built it to prove me right. Dad nodded slowly. I thought I was protecting you. Pushing you toward stability. But I was really just scared. Scared you'd try something too big and fall hard. I did fall, I said. Plenty of times. But not telling you wasn't about resentment. It was about needing space to get back up my way. There was silence. Then Aunt June, always the sharp-tongued observer, laughed lightly. Well, Nora, you've officially thrown the wildest family reunion in Carter history. I grinned. And we haven't even started today's itinerary. They blinked. By noon, I had flown in a panel of tech innovators and creatives, founders, investors, artists, who'd helped shape Carter Interactive over the years. We hosted a private summit right there on the island, under a vaulted pavilion shaded with sails, the sea breeze passing through. My family watched, wide-eyed, as I led a discussion on the future of digital immersion, of tokenized creativity, of redefining the value of art. I was no longer the misunderstood artist in a beat-up Civic, I was the industry leader everyone wanted to listen to. Even Dad. I caught him lingering behind the group afterward, just watching me. A proud look on his face that I hadn't seen since I was 12, winning a middle school art contest that he didn't think mattered. That evening, I hosted a final dinner, outdoors this time, beneath strings of lights woven through palm trees. It wasn't about show anymore. It was about presence. When dessert arrived, I stood and tapped my glass. I want to say something, I said. All eyes turned. For a long time, I thought this day would feel like revenge. Like validation. Like the big I told you so moment I'd been waiting for. But it's not that. I looked at each of them, Dad, Mom, Harper, Caleb, aunts and uncles, cousins. People who'd loved me in their own misguided ways. People who doubted me more than they realized. I'm glad I kept my journey quiet. Not because you didn't deserve to know. But because I needed to prove to myself that I could do it without applause. Without support. Without shortcuts. I paused, then smiled. But that doesn't mean I want to do the rest of this alone. They looked surprised. Touched, even. I built something beautiful, and it's still growing. And maybe now, we can share it, with honesty. No more assumptions. No more categories. No more being the failure or the savior. Just people, trying to understand each other better than we did before. Mom's eyes glistened. Dad nodded silently. And for the first time ever, they didn't look at me like a mystery or a disappointment. They just looked at me. As me. After dinner, as the rest of the family danced under the stars to a live jazz trio I'd flown in from New York, Dad pulled me aside. I read the full article, he said. Every word. I waited. I've spent decades believing success looked one way, numbers, suits, golf memberships. But watching you this weekend, I realize I've been playing checkers in a world of chess. I laughed softly. You're not wrong. He smiled, then grew serious again. That offer you sent a few years ago. The investment pitch? Still have a copy of it, I said. Would you consider updating it? I raised an eyebrow. You want in now? I want to back the daughter I should have believed in sooner, he replied. No strings. Just support. I studied him. The same man who once cut me off with a cold glare across a dinner table now stood here, humble, changed. Let's talk, I said. The next morning, Harper caught up with me by the pool, barefoot and holding her sandals. I've been thinking, she said, about what you said, about hiding your success. I don't think I could have done it. I would have screamed it from the rooftops. I smiled. Maybe that's why I had to. She laughed. You win. I'll admit it. You win everything. It was never a competition. It was, she said. But not anymore. She hesitated, then added, And I want to learn more. About your work. Your world. Maybe it's time I stopped thinking corporate strategy is the only kind of strategy. That surprised me more than anything else that week. As the weekend came to a close, I stood at the airstrip once more, watching my family board the jet. This time, there were no judgmental glances. No whispered doubts. Just hugs. Thank yous. Promises to call. Real ones, maybe. Caleb paused at the door. You know, he said, when you said you were doing fine all those years, I thought you were just being stubborn. I was, I said. Stubborn and right. He laughed, then gave me a quick, rare hug. Proud of you, sis. Truly. As the jet doors closed and the engines roared to life, I stood back, sunglasses on, the ocean breeze catching the hem of my silk dress. The island was quiet again. But everything had changed. Back in my office that night, I reviewed the prototype one last time, my newest project. The one that would revolutionize how art was created, valued, and owned. The platform was nearly ready. And now, for the first time, my family would witness it all, not through whispers or headlines, but standing beside me. Samantha entered quietly. Press conference is scheduled. Media teams prepped. Stock dashboard is tracking an upward trend. I nodded. Let's frame it all just right. One more thing, she added. The Forbes article. We had extras printed. Framed in every suite. Just like you asked. Good, I said. Let it remind them what they ignored. And what they almost missed. She paused. Was this all about them? No, I said, standing and walking to the window. It started that way. But now? It's about anyone who's ever been underestimated. Dismissed. Told to play small. The skyline stretched beyond the horizon, glittering with possibility. I played quiet for 15 years, I said. But I built loudly. Now, I live louder. Samantha smiled. So what happens next? I turned. Now? I said. Now we build something even bigger.